All right. Hey, what's going on, everybody? I wanted to start a new series where I not only am writing and sharing that way, like I've been for a long time, but I wanted to start doing videos that can also be just listened to that function sort of like these caffeine emails. Um, but they're a little bit more real. You can see me. We can have a little bit better of a dialogue and conversation over video and audio. And I thought, what better than on my birthday, my 30th birthday, to start this uh, friendly conversational blog series. I'm going to be teaching a lot more and hopefully publishing pretty frequently. Behind the scenes, I've had a lot of support, and so I'm excited to introduce you to some other people that I'm working with to help make some of this content happen. But yeah, hey, glad to see you, and I wanted to share some thoughts about being 30. So this post is on 30. Today, I am a person of routine. I don't think I ever would have thought that when I was younger. Every morning, like this morning, I get up early before the sun, typically 4:30 or 5, and I sip on some black tea that I make with some mushroom immunity powder, so it tastes sort of earthy. And 30 so far has been pretty good. We've all been kept inside and sort of forced to grow in new ways, and so I'm trying to use this transitionary period as a new constraint for myself to become more productive and really to sort of tackle some areas that maybe I haven't tackled yet. I think there's kind of two ways to interpret these events, outside of some of the disaster and sort of consequences. It's either a time for us to sort of, think when things go back to the way they were, then I will resume my life. And I think the other way of looking at things is, how can I use this almost like karate, type thinking? How can I use this thing coming at me to transition, to grow, to use it as leverage to do something new? So, I'm working in this transition to sort of develop as much as possible my productivity. I'm using some of the difficulties as training, and I'm also looking at where is the puck going, and because I don't think things will be the way that they were before when this is all said and done. So how can I adapt to those changes now and embrace them and use this time to really train new healthy habits and practices? And I think this video series is maybe it's part of that. One thing that I find really interesting about being home all the time, and even me speaking with you in this way, is we're spending a lot of time in our own heads. And I find it interesting that when you're not able to be, outside and exercising and in some of our routines and even around other people where you're hugging, maybe you're out at the club and you're dancing, we're spending a lot of time up here instead of in our full sort of body. And I find it interesting that even on Zoom calls and things like that, it's only from the neck up that you're engaging with other people. And I think that makes it very mentally difficult for people when you're not so integrated from your mind and your body, and you're sort of just up here. We've got so much information coming at us, and we're engaging with people only from the head up. And so I'm trying to also remind myself to remember the body, to exercise, and to sort of ground, not just in an information and logical way, but also in an emotional and physical way of just living. And I think when you're kind of inside for days at a time and you're not really getting out, I find it's easy to lose track of the sort of physical aspect of life. And so I'm trying to make sure I practice and re-engage that as much as possible to stay grounded. And I can't imagine, I'm lucky I live with my girlfriend here, and I know it'd be very difficult for lots of people to be just by yourself during this time. And so send me an email, comment on this video. If you want some connection and support, that's what this community is about. And I know that would be very difficult And I think it'd be tough because you really have to face some things maybe that you didn't face before. You really have to look inward in a way that typically we can avoid when life's going on around us, and we can just, lose ourselves in going out and seeing people, and suddenly you're all alone, and you're sort of trapped with yourself, which I think is difficult for some people. For me, I'm trying to spend more time, solo and meditating and that type of thing. But my question to you is, what would it look like to work with this moment, to use these constraints, and use this transition as a point of leverage to accomplish or become something different on the other side? The proverbial mud has been kicked up in the water, and nobody knows what's going on. Nobody can really see. And I call it like the great escape. When everything's changing, when structures are falling, when the water is all muddy, the great escape is, what does it look like to change who you are on the other side of this? Because no one's really paying attention anyway, and I think a good way. And so if you wanted to make a big change to your personality or whatever, this is a great time to do it. On investing, I'm so fascinated by the macro sort of investment landscape right now. And I won't spend too much time on this because I think it's my own nerd obsession. But my birthday arrives on this peak financial crisis, which we're in. And I think what's relevant to discuss and is interesting around financial crises like this is that when the bubble pops, when the financial run that's been going on gets forced down to sort of a new reality, I think we learn a lot of harsh truths that we were intentionally avoiding for a very long time. And so there's also a lot of financial lessons that can be learned when a bubble pops. And I think what we learned is that there was a lot of things maybe we were doing pre-financial crisis that were unnecessary, that were maybe wasteful, and in some ways were irrational. And now is a time to see reality. Now is a time to think about maybe what we had missed in the time leading up to this. And I know for some people that's maybe a preparedness. I know it's difficult, but with sort of the credit and debt cycle, that's what tends to happen, is we sort of forget the reality of some financial truths, and we end up being more wasteful. And a bubble popping in a financial crisis really forces us to see what matters. And that could be in our personal lives. I love the way that Chamath, I think he's the chairman of Virgin Galactic, said that, now is the time to really ask ourselves what matters, what's my purpose, how can I build a really strong foundation for myself so that I can help others. I think we maybe lose sight of some of those things when there's such maybe a slush of cash moving around. And so I think I'll close with this, which is, if the last decade, and this is sort of another quote from Chamath, but if the last decade was about optimization and growth, the next decade's about resilience and preparedness. And that's what we're learning during this financial crisis, is that, and this humanitarian and health crisis, is that preparedness and investing in resilience is worth it. And so I think that's what we'll take with us as we move forward. There definitely will be some psychological scarring from this event, and there'll be some hesitancy to return to normal as things open up again. But there's some lessons that we'll learn, and those will be ultimately net positive for us in the long run. So what else do I want to discuss? I think, politically, socially, and culturally, without getting too much into politics, I think a lot of our assumptions about the world are being broken. We're starting to see for the first time that the information that we're receiving from one location might be very different and drastically different from, other locations. And there's always been this kind of narrative of fake news and everything like that. But I think it's sort of bigger than that. I think we're starting to see through the machine for the first time. You've got all these different people sort of having all these different opinions about the financial things going on, about the health, and for me, I found it really fascinating because, back in maybe February, there were people who were very vocal about the virus. And then there were people who were very much downplaying it or saying it was a hoax. And, whichever side you're on, I'm not even too concerned with that. I'm just saying it's interesting that there's these sort of informational bubbles that we can live in. And when it comes to health, sometimes that has drastic consequences, and we're going to have to figure that out a little bit better for ourselves. But more importantly, I think we're recognizing that there's narratives that are being shared with us from different people and different institutions. And I think we're starting to question those narratives in a healthy way and say, do these people or entities have my best interest at mind? What is their intention or objective? And I think a lot of times we also forget that many of the information sources we hear from are businesses that are also trying to make money, and there's some conflicts there. But I want to leave you with one quote that I found really interesting, and I honestly forget who said this. But it's that and especially in a time like this, when you look at what happens in politics, is that there's no such thing as a Democrat. There's no such thing as a Republican. There's only people who are in, and there's people who are out. And the people who are in are trying to stay in, and the people who are out are trying to make it in. And that is what's governing a lot of the politics, I think, that you see. And I think to see through this maybe false narrative of these two sides that you have to pick from, I just don't think it's the reality of things. And, this isn't even a political statement at all. It's just, I find it very interesting that things that might have been very Democratic or maybe Republican can completely change in an instant depending on circumstances. And so we're going to get, probably some form of universal basic income, where 3 months ago that would have been entirely crazy, especially when you look at maybe which parties might bring that in. And again, I actually think all these things are positive, and it's not a political statement. It's just seeing through this false dichotomy that I think culturally people want you to be stuck in. So I think when bubbles go bust, we start to see more clearly. I think we start seeing through some of the politics and information. I think we start seeing through some of the machinery of the financial system. And, I find that to be really interesting. What is another lesson that I've learned at 30? And I hope you don't mind my rambling now. One thing I'm trying to do in this moment is enjoy things, like pleasurable things, that are maybe even bad for me, without shame. And I like to use ice cream as a metaphor for this, which is sometimes it's just great to eat the ice cream. And as someone who's obsessed with health, I think you can do yourself a disservice if you never allow yourself to enjoy things, to have fun, to let go, to let loose a little bit. And so maybe if you are having a harder time dealing with, some of the crisis, and having, a pint of ice cream makes you feel better, I say go for it. And I think the big thing that's shifted for me is that previously in my life, in the 20s, in my 20s, I was a bit more controlled by some of these things, right? Like I had a bit more of a combative relationship, let's say, with should I eat bad? Should I eat good? I'd eat something bad and I'd feel, like, oh, I'm not being like the healthiest person that I can be. And now it's like, I really can have the ice cream and just be like, this is amazing. I'm so happy eating this. And then I'm done. And then I think it's because in the back of my mind, I know that it's not something that controls me anymore. I know that it's my decision to give in and have that thing. So I think if you're at a place where you still feel like it's a battle, between letting yourself enjoy things, I understand that space, and I'm trying to get past that point where it's my decision to give in and enjoy it. So that's just my 2 cents on enjoying things in my 30s. I want to talk about something that I'm grateful for, which is the technology we have available today is absolutely incredible. We're going through this deflationary period in our culture with the technology that we own, where prices just continue to drop for incredible services. And the easiest example is I can own every song ever created through basically a $10 a month Spotify membership. Same thing with Netflix. I can watch every movie, every show ever made for a fraction of the cost, not to mention all the free education on YouTube, not to mention the way that I'm, sending messages back and forth. Like, there is so much free leverage in technology. I'm just very grateful for, in this moment where there's a crisis, knowing that we have all these tools. It's incredible. We've got infinite learning available to us. And so that's something I'm really grateful for. So I want to talk some about personal growth and what I hope to accomplish. And this is part of the reason for this video series. And I'll kind of close with this. In the next decade, I hope to be more of what I call a mirror for other people. I've had so many coaches, therapists, friends help me develop who I was over the last decade. I don't think I could have done it myself. And so what I hope these videos and audios are, what I hope my emails are, is being a mirror for your growth. I hope that you can utilize this content, not, my writing or whatever, not for me to tell you what to do, but for me to help you see who you are, where you need to grow next, and answer some of the bigger questions in your life. I don't have the answers, but I hope I can help you by being reflective and help you see maybe areas you didn't consider, new questions and new ways of seeing yourself and growing. So to me, the next decade is about being a mirror, and being a mirror means writing. Being a mirror means coaching. Being a mirror means creating these videos. It means interviewing people who have domain expertise in things that I don't maybe know about that you can learn from. And, I think for those who are interested and serious, there's never been a better time to go through a massive amount of growth. And so I suppose what I learned in my 20s is that there's this metagame that you can play with your life, which is, it's not about what happens day to day at work. It's not about what happens day to day in relationships. It's about the bigger journey that you're on. It's about the bigger outcomes that you're after over the span of your entire life and career. And so my perspective is that the real game is the inner game. And the practice field, that's work. The practice field, that's relationships. That's where I test out how much clarity I have, how much understanding I have, how much I've grown. Is, work is just practice, but life in the bigger journey, that's the play. That's what I'm really trying to do at the end of the day, is how much am I as an individual developing myself and learning and understanding and growing, and all those mistakes and all the fears you have around these other little arenas. Remember that that's just the practice field, and the real thing is how you grow over the course of your life. So I'm hitting, the 30 guideposts. I've got more guideposts, let's hope, ahead of me. And the question I guess I have for people, and the question that I have for myself, is on the broader scheme of my life, am I growing? In this next chapter, this next year, this next decade, what is it that I have to learn to continue this self-development? And I hope to continue to discuss that with you to help grow alongside you in the future videos and future writing. And it's good to break the barrier and hang out and see each other here. So add comments to the video if you feel like you've got anything to share. And I'll be back again with more videos like this. I always encourage you to reply, ask questions, comment, hang out with each other in there. And I'm just looking forward to it. So thanks.